I'm on a sugarcane estate, and I had to drive about 900 kilometers to find this. And you can see the number plate, Mhoba. Mhoba means sugarcane. So let's see what's inside.
Hi, I'm Robert Greaves from Mobile Rum. I'm the owner, founder, distiller, creator of the brand and the product. I started distilling in about 2013 as a hobby, and it has grown from there and taken over my life, and I'm now a fanatical rum maker. Rum in broad terms there's two categories. There's the molasses based rums. You also get syrup based rums, and then you get sugarcane juice rums. A large percentage of sugarcane juice rums are what's termed rum agricole, but they're more than just sugarcane juice rums. They come from French territories and they're made in a specific way, and they have a whole history and pedigree and geographical indication which allows them to call themselves rum agricole. We are not a rum agricole, but we are a sugarcane juice rum. So we are similar to rum agricoles in that we use sugarcane juice as our feedstock for rum, not molasses. And just as we were discussing earlier, sugarcane juice rums are a lot more expensive and labor intensive to produce than a molasses based rum. A lot of people here in South Africa unfortunately don't appreciate that, which is why a large portion of our rum is now being exported. In fact, nearly all of it is going to Europe and France in particular, because they have an appreciation for sugarcane juice rums. It's part of their culture, their history. They've made rum on their islands like Martinique for hundreds of years, and as I say, it's part of their culture now, and they like sugarcane juice rums, and they love ours, which is great, and that's why we're sending it there. So apart from the flavor, there's also a different manufacturing process. Obviously molasses based rums are made by buying in molasses, often from other operations, sugar mills, then diluting that molasses with water and then fermenting that mixture, whereas we juice sugarcane to get the juice, and we ferment that pure sugarcane juice with no water or no any other additives. It's 100% cane juice that we ferment. And to make a litre of cane juice is quite a lot of hard work. If you take it from planting the cane, growing the cane, cutting it, detrashing it by hand, shredding it, and then finally juicing it, more than half the work in making the rum is done up to fermentation. So it's very labor intensive, a lot of hard work. It's like running a farm and a distillery at the same time. So it makes it a more expensive product, particularly on a small scale. Running a small farm is also more expensive per unit, obviously, than running a big, large-scale farm. So we are running a tiny little farm and a tiny little distillery, and that makes our rum quite pricey, and you have to really like it to want to pay for it, I guess. Geographically, we are in Malelane, or near Malelane, just outside the small town of Malelane, which is a small, predominantly farming town in Mpumalanga, near Mozambique. So we're near the Mozambican border, about 50 kilometers away from the border with Mozambique and with Swaziland. Warm subtropical climate, and sugarcane growing area. We have a big sugar mill about 20 kilometers away from us, and the sugar industry here all grew up around supplying the sugar mill with cane to produce sugar. And I got the idea to make rum from the sugar, to add value to the sugar in some other way than making sugar. So I got the idea in Mauritius. Well, I had the idea already, and I kind of decided at last to definitely go with it in Mauritius after meeting some people there who are doing something similar to what we're doing here. And the guy who influenced me most said to me, wherever there's sugarcane, there's rum. And I just remember thinking, I live in a valley with thousands of hectares of cane and not one rum. So I decided to change that. There are different opinions about where rum comes from. Some say from the east, some say from Brazil. Richard Seal, who is extremely knowledgeable, believes that the origin of rum is Barbados. Barbados were the first commercial, large-scale producers of rum. In his opinion, I can't claim to know any better than any of these guys, but from what I've read, rum was kind of simultaneously made in several places. Brazil not being called rum, but the other cane spirits like cachaça. Apparently also in the East. It may well have been for medicinal purposes, not for consumption as an alcoholic beverage. But it becomes a debate as to who made it first and where it comes from. But yeah, Richard Seale claims that modern production of rum on a sort of production scale does predate single malt whiskies. So yeah, it definitely has a pedigree, a history, and a lot of tradition associated with how it's made, particularly in the Caribbean, in Central and South America. But as this guy told me in Mauritius, wherever there's sugarcane, there's rum. There's big rums coming out of the east as well. Wherever they grow sugarcane in a large scale, they usually have made rum out of it. I'm glad that we are also now doing that down here and in Natal. We're not doing things traditionally. We've very much done our own thing. I had the idea to make a single malt whiskey style of spirit, but using sugarcane as feedstock instead of a grain. But in terms of principle, I wanted to make a pure spirit, a spirit like single malt whiskey that's unadulterated, unflavored. I don't want to put sugar and caramel and vanilla or any other additives in the spirit. And I didn't know at that stage there was such a category of rum. I thought rum was all doctored to some extent. And most of it, unfortunately, is in this country, and most of the big rums overseas are still full of additives, which I personally don't like and don't agree with. But yeah, most rum has still got stuff added to it, but we certainly don't add anything to our rum other than oak, excepting our pineapple rum, which we do infuse with pineapple. So we have broken the law slightly there and made a pineapple infused rum. But again, there's no sugar or any other artificial type flavorant in there. It's all rum and 100% pineapple. Traditionally, rum in the Caribbean, well, not everywhere, but a lot of them are, the pot stilled rums are done in what they call double retort pot stills. We don't run double retort pot stills at all. I'm running self-built stainless steel pot stills, so the shell of the still is stainless steel. All of the internals are copper, so you get a lot of interaction between the vapors in the still and copper, which you need to remove sulfur-free components in the distillate. Otherwise, you do end up with a lot of sulfur in the product, which you don't want. So some people who see our stills are stainless are worried about the lack of copper, but there's a lot of copper inside our stills, and that's where you want the copper, in my opinion, is you want it interacting with the vapor. It doesn't do you much good on the outside of the still, particularly in the pot section. For many years, or initially, we tried to market our rum locally, and South Africa is particularly uneducated in terms of rum. And I discovered that quite painfully by trying to market the product here and doing a lot of events and functions and speaking to people. And after having been overseas a bit and met people overseas and realizing that this whole culture of pure rum, or what I call real rum, was a thing overseas. You get real rums that are not sugared, that are not flavored, like single malt whiskies. They are pure expressions of the product from which they come, and that's what I believe rum should be, as a pure expression of sugarcane, whether it be from molasses or syrup or whatever it's made from. Ultimately, it's an expression of sugarcane, an alcoholic expression of sugarcane. And just speaking to people who don't understand rum and don't understand why a rum like Captain Morgan or like Don Papa doesn't taste like our rum. They don't seem to realize how many additives and how many things have been added to those rums. They are not pure rums. And I have tried to explain to people why our rum is expensive and why it tastes the way it tastes. Our rum is 100% pure sugarcane juice rum. We don't add stuff to our rum other than oak and water. And my analogy has been that some of these other rums that are heavily flavored and have a lot of additives in them are something like a synthetic orange juice, like Oros in South Africa. Oros is the big orange flavored juice that a lot of kids drink, and it's apparently, I think, 6% orange juice. So it's not real orange juice. It's a synthetic attempt at being an orange flavored drink. And I feel a lot of these rums are a bit like that. They are synthetic attempts at being rum. And I like to say our rum is like hand squeezed fresh orange juice. We grow the oranges, we hand pick the oranges, we cut the oranges, we juice the oranges, and that's not going to taste like Oros. The freshly squeezed orange juice is a totally different animal to a synthetic, sugared, flavored, attempted orange juice. And I think many rums are like that. They don't taste anything like rum. And they're not rum, to be honest. In fact, in terms of legislation here in South Africa, if you have more than 1 gram per litre of sugar, you're not allowed to have the word rum on the label. And nearly all of the rums here do have more than 1 gram of sugar in them, a lot more, amongst other things, and they still have the word rum clearly displayed on the label. So, as Richard Seale says, rum should be sweet, but never sweetened. Rum should not be sweetened. In my opinion, it shouldn't be flavored either. If it's a pure rum. If it's a spiced rum or a flavored rum, then you state that, then that's fine. But if you just call it rum, it shouldn't have 1,000 other additives in it. In fact, it should have no other additives in it. Well, in terms of sugar, it's specifically stipulated there mustn't be more than 1 gram per litre. That's South African law. Some guys follow the law, and if it's spiced, sugared, flavored, they don't put the word rum on it. They call it something else, spirit aperitif or something to that effect. And I guess that's fine. I've also seen rum flavored spirit, so it's yeah. But the guys who are just calling it rum when it's got all these other things in it, I don't believe is correct. It shouldn't be called rum. Rum should be rum, pure rum. These are all ex-wine casks, ex-South African wine casks. So they're all French oak, or nearly all of them. I think there's one Hungarian cask in here. So it's all French oak, came from the Cape Winelands. I have opened the barrels and ground the inside out to remove a lot of the wine contaminated layer inside there. And then I've retoasted the barrels and filled them with rum. So they are what we call our French cask rum, which has won us quite a few gold medals overseas. It's our flagship product, I guess. Definitely the one we're getting the most rave reviews on from overseas rum aficionados. And as I say, gold medals. We've won several gold medals. One in Berlin, one in Martinique, and another one somewhere else in Europe, which I can't remember, to be honest. But yeah, that's our French cask rum, which is, as the name implies, aged in French casks, which are all ex-red wine casks from the Cape. Very high quality wood. Unfortunately, aging in a red wine cask is quite tricky. You need to get them really fresh, as they call wet casks, so you need to get straight after they've been dumped, you can add the rum to them. I've not had much success adding rum to previously used red wine casks without refurbishing them first. You get a lot of sulfury, vinegary, funny flavors coming through, which as I say, I don't like. So I've had a lot more success with reworking the casks, refurbishing them, retoasting them, and then filling them with rum. So it's almost like a new French cask. There is a hint of fruitiness and of wine influence in there. You never get all of it out, but nearly all of it's gone, and you get a lot less wine influence on the rum once they've been refurbished. Our whiskey casks are all standing outside. We imported some American oak ex-bourbon casks, and those we haven't done anything to. Those are freshly emptied bourbon casks, which are then shipped wherever you want them, and we order them here and then fill them with rum. So there's been no refurbishment done there whatsoever. So that rum's not been released yet, it's still aging. Our oldest stuff here in the French casks is almost 2.5 years old now. The bourbon casks, we're only approaching a year now, so the rum's still very young. And with a used cask like that, you need a lot more time to get a lot of influence from the cask. Obviously the wood's been flushed quite a bit by the first fill of bourbon, so the influence is a lot slower on the rum, less dramatic, and more subtle, but it takes more time. Okay, so these fields were all cane fields which were supplying the sugar mill a few years ago, but with the increase in power costs in South Africa, these fields that were irrigated by pumped water from boreholes became too expensive to run. So the farmer who runs the rest of our farm stopped farming these fields commercially for the sugar mill, and yeah, they basically lay fallow for several seasons and had weeds and things growing in them. Anyway, we ripped them and replanted them with cane that we run organically. So we don't put any commercial pesticides or herbicides on these fields, and they are used only for the cane from these fields is used only for rum. They're not cutting cane at the moment, unfortunately. Here you can see some piles of cane that will be juiced tomorrow, probably. We harvest between 11 and 13 months, so we aim at 12 months. But some fields go a month less or a month longer, depending on water and when we need the cane as well. So this is a matter of interest. We're starting to plant casuarina trees, little seedlings, which we are planting in all the old mine quarries to harvest for firewood for our stills. So our stills are wood fired. So we are planting and harvesting casuarina trees for the firewood. This is my cane press that I built. It's one of a kind. It's hydraulically driven with an old hydraulic power pack from an excavator, and it basically uses a hydraulic ram that squeezes the cane, the shredded cane, for a sort of prolonged period, so that the juice has time to run out. With a traditional roller press, I find that once the cane's gone through the nip point in the rollers, it expands again, and it's almost like a sponge. It soaks up the juice again. So you end up having to put a stick through the press a couple of times before you get all the juice out. Whereas with this hydraulic arrangement, you can put pressure on it and maintain that pressure for a minute or so while all the juice runs out. And once the juice is gone, obviously it can expand all it likes, and there's no juice to soak up anymore. So we're getting much better recoveries doing it like this. It's just slow, and it's a batch type process. We would have fill up the cylinder, press it, and maintain pressure on that for some time before the juice runs out.
Is there any use for this?
Yeah, we're going to burn that as well. That burns like the clappers. I mean, the sugar mill runs entirely on their bagasse, and they actually have excess energy. They were trying to sell electricity back to Eskom, who refused to take it. And obviously it depends on scale. Once you get to a certain size, we should actually be totally self-sufficient in terms of energy from the bagasse from the cane. We cut all our own firewood and split that with a splitter that we built ourselves as well. So all of our heat comes from wood that we cut here on the property. But it's not indigenous wood we're cutting down. It's trees that we've actually planted expressly for the purpose of generating heat. So yeah, the intention here is to have a tasting venue and a place where people can come and have something to eat and taste our rums and just visit our distillery. Much like the wine farms have in the Cape, same sort of idea. Behind us is dual purpose. It's a water feature which looks and sounds quite nice, but its primary function is to be an evaporative cooler. So the water that's trickling down these rocks here cools down and then falls into this pond at the bottom, and that pond then serves as a reservoir where we pump water to cool our stills down. So the water is pumped out of this pond at the bottom through the cooling coils at the top of our stills, which we'll show you shortly, and then it gets returned by those little pipes at the top, and it all runs down the rocks and cools down a bit before going back to cool more rum down. These are my three creations, my pot stills. I've built several revisions of pot stills, and these are the newest running versions. I've built stills twice the size that will be commissioned quite soon. It should be running before the end of the year. But they are stainless steel pot stills that are full of copper. So from the beginning of the vapor path up to the condensing coils, there's a lot of copper inside the still. So it's the structural outside part of the still that's stainless steel. They are heated with hot oil. So we have a hot oil generator outside, which we'll show you now. We make hot oil by burning wood. The hot oil then gets pumped into this plenum chamber here at the bottom of the still. So that false bottom of the still is heated by the hot oil. So the hot oil gets pumped in there, and then it interacts with the bottom of the still, which heats the rum up, or heats the wash up, and then the oil gets pumped back, returns back to the oil heater to get heated up again. Those big 50mm copper pipes, I've got the cooling water in them from the water feature we saw outside. Out of these valves here, I don't know if you can see clearly there, but there's a stream of rum coming out there, so you can actually adjust the offtake with this valve and see how much rum is coming off through that sight glass. The rum then exits via this pipe here and goes into carboys on this side. So those 3 bottles are one for each still. All of these bottles are numbered and dated, so we know which batch they come from and which number in terms of sequence they were from each particular batch. Unfortunately, during the distillation process, I can't be here all the time. We need to have other people tending the stills, and the best way to make sure that we don't run in too far into tails is to actually split the distillations into different cuts and fractions. So each distillation is split into 3 or 4 of these big glass carboy bottles. We number them with the date, the time, and then the number from each distillation. And then I taste each of those cuts and decide how much of each cut must go into the final rum. Yeah, living out in the sticks on our farm, I built my own stills. I wanted to make distillate as a hobby many years ago, and I didn't even think about where I could buy a still, so I made one. And our whole philosophy in terms of all of our production pretty much runs in that theme. Over here you can see we have laser engravers that are cutting out the profile of our boxes for our rums. So in here we, true to form again, do everything ourselves. We print all our own labels. We print our box stickers, as we call them, which is the sticker that goes on the outside of the cardboard case and identifies each specific rum. Yeah, and we also print our labels on these same printers. Our labels that are printed on this metallic vinyl are also all printed here on these printers. It's now picking up these location markers, and then it'll cut the sticker out according to the position of those markers. And then we stick the detail and the branding for each rum on the outside of the box once it's been put together. So this is our latest order for La Maison de Whiskey, who is our distributor in France. And this is a 12,000 bottle order that is being prepared as quickly as possible. Some of our bottles are labeled with bamboo labels. So each bottle gets put into this jig with one of the labels is placed like that. The bottle's then put in, and then the top label is placed in this area here, and then this cover plate gets put on, and the whole system gets clamped with these wing nuts and left for a day to dry. Okay, yeah, so our premium bamboo labeled rums are also packaged in this bamboo box. Each bottle and box is individually numbered, and the box matches the bottle. And yeah, we make these from bamboo sheeting, which comes from China originally, but the bamboo is then cut into this profile and all glued together to form this box here at the distillery. So it's a bit like our rum making, very labor intensive, very hands-on. It's not mass market commercial stuff. Okay, these are our Locally sold rums, these are only for sale in South Africa. They're packaged in console glass, South African bottles, 750 milliliters. This is our original stave-aged dark rum and our pot-stilled white rum. These are our rums that are currently being exported to La Maison de Whisky in France and the rest of Europe. We're doing 3 variations of white rum, our pineapple flavored rum, and then 4 variations of aged rums. All of them are quite unique and different in terms of how they're made, and then obviously the resulting flavor profile in the finished product is also quite different. This, for example, is a mixture of aged rum and quite funky heavy white rum. This is our stave aged rum, which has then been finished in a South African whiskey cask. These are our French cask rum, which we've won several awards for. This is our glass cask rum, which is our stave aged rum, our premium stave aged rum, which is aged for 2 years in glass bottles. This is our select release white rum, which is a blend of heavier, more robust fractions of rum than this, which is our entry level softer white rum. And then this is our what we call our high ester rum, which is done with a long dunder fermentation, which is what's done in Jamaica to produce high ester funky rums. Very bold, smelly rums made in Jamaica are made with dunder, which is lees or sour mash. In the bourbon industry, they take leftovers from the previous batch and add that back into the new batch, which helps with ester formation, and it just makes a bolder, heavier rum. I just wanted to tell you that little story about Dirk Becker, who approached me at the UK Rum Fest in 2018, and he very politely came behind our stall and introduced himself to me, and explained that he'd been in the industry for, I think it was 27 years, and that he felt that he'd only encountered a handful of truly special things in that time, and that Mhoba Rum was one of them.